Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Paranormal Crossroads, the native Paranormal Crossroads. And it is us three rangers today, and we'll be speaking with our good friend and our. Go ahead and do your technical adjustments, Stan Milford Jr., and talking today about his new book, The Paranormal Ranger. It's so glad to have us three back on and to have Stan come back. I know you've been on the road quite a bit, and it's wonderful to have you back. Good morning,
Thank you.
everybody. Afternoon.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. Good to be here.
So it took some finagling to get on today. We had we're always technically dealing with something, but it's good that we can work things out and get on the show and have a wonderful discussion with anything. Is there anybody would like to share anything, any stories that have happened this week, or any updates on anything that you feel is significant to our show?
Well, I had heard some kind of sad news is that I had heard that Christopher O'Brien has passed away within the past couple of days. And this was an individual that within the UFO and uh, paranormal genre of investigation and research. John and I had met Christopher or Chris at different places, throughout our time of traveling and presenting, but I'd just like to wish a prayer to him and to his family, and so anyway.
Yeah, our condolences as well.
Hmm.
Jonathan, is there anything you'd like to share?
Well, both me and Stan about a week ago went out to Los Angeles and had a great time. Oh my goodness, he took me out to a steak dinner that I'm still dreaming about that one. Uh, and yeah, we had a really good time. And while I was down there, I was meeting with some producers and doing some video shoots. So that took just a little bit of time.
That's wonderful, and I'm glad you guys made it back safe. And it must have been a really, really needed to go to be with family and friends. And but today we're going to talk about why Stan has been missing.
Yeah, we're getting
MIA
ready to
from the
send
show.
the official search and rescue party.
And we
Yeah.
found him, and he was able to come back on. But Stan, could you share with us your journey that you've been on recently and talking about your book and what has happened to you on along the journey?
Yeah. So back when I was working with the Navajo Rangers, John and I were a part of what was called Special Projects, and we were assigned by the chief ranger at the time to investigate cases that would fall under the umbrella of paranormal. Um, this could be anything from UFO cases to involving extraterrestrial sightings or witnessing UFOs, Bigfoot, hauntings, cases involving witchcraft and or the legendary skinwalker, a lot of different things that would fall under that umbrella.
Hmm.
And so John and I had worked together under special projects doing these investigations for about 11 years or so. And, but even after John retired in, what was it, 2010, 2011, John, when you
2011.
So even after that, I continued to investigate uh, those cases that fall under those that title, and so over the years, a lot of investigation, and um, some of these could be cases involving individuals hoaxing things, and putting things out there that 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 were faked, and but there's a majority of the cases we did were actual cases involving these phenomena, and so during that time, you know, thank God, I would make notes on my own, personal notes during those investigations. And so I had banker's box after banker's box of my own personal notes after I retired, and and so when John and I had traveled, to places like Scotland, and as you know, Michelle, Canada, and other
Mhm.
places around the United States presenting on the subject. Um, there was a great interest in the subject, and even so much as drawing the attention of directors and producers like Peter Brogan from Scotland, who was a producer and director with the movie Rob Roy and other movies, and the one of the execs with Harper Collins, Harper Collins and William Morrow Publishing had watched an episode of Unsolved Mysteries that John and I were featured on the Paranormal Rangers, and he's seen that and took great interest in it, and contacted John, and later contacted them back, and they were interested in John and I in writing or producing books, and so immediately I jumped on that, and everything with that. There was a certain serendipity with it, just like with the productions and uh, presentations John and I done. Everything just kind of fell in place to make that happen, and lo and behold, October 1st, my book, The Paranormal Ranger, a Navajo investigator's search for the unexplained, came out, and since October 1st of this year, the sales have been incredible around the world,
Mhm.
and a great interest in it. And to this day, um, I'm still, this whole year of 2025 will be um, really promoting that book, doing presentations and book signings and radio appearances and podcasts, and just like what we're on right now, to promote the book and get the word out about it. And so far, majority of the feedback I'm getting is extremely positive. Even gain or garnered a really large Navajo uh, Dene support in this, which going into this, John and I have always been kind of leery about about our Navajo audience and how they'll receive,
Mhm.
what it is John and I present, and in even Native America. But it has been, I would say, 99% positive, and I'm so grateful and blessed, for this. And I think there's a certain level of karma that goes into this because, yeah, John and I worked SWAT. We were the commanders for our SWAT team, and John and I had been shot at over the years, and uh, spit on and vomited on and making arrests and things, and it was a part of doing the job. And today, looking back on that career, we don't have any bullet holes in us, and we didn't have to put any bullet holes in anybody else. So I would say we're very, very blessed in that. And having given so much of yourself and your life to others, today I think John and I are receiving a lot of that positive energy back. And
Mhm.
him and I travel. We've traveled, like I said, to places like Scotland, and we've just really had guardian angels watching over us as we've traveled and presented, and so it's been beyond any expectations I ever had in this, and I'm really grateful. So
Stan, one of the things about your book, why it's so intriguing, is you talk about the Native American, somewhat of our origins, and an anthology of stories. It talks about the different worlds by which the Navajo progressed, and you did that throughout your books, and then you incorporated stories from your experiences that you were given while investigating as a ranger. And that was very captivating. And I think the Navajo, because I'm Navajo too, are intrigued by not only your stories of modern times, but the origins of where we came as a people, and your origins from a child on, what made you a ranger, what gave you the opportunities to become a ranger so that you could have these experiences. And like you said, you were blessed because that was something that you and John were supposed to do in your lifetime, to
yeah.
uphold law on the reservation, because there's just so many things that are incorporated. That one of them is the culture, the other one's language, the other one is making sure things stay in a peaceful way with families and living out in the remote area. That's what's captivated me about your book, is that you maintain that status quo in order to write about the origins of your life and the origins of the Navajo life. And that was very intriguing. I think that's why the sales are up with our people.
Well, I think there's a lot of different elements that went into writing this book. Just like you said, there's the cultural aspect of this, but
Hmm.
there's also the element of law enforcement and me telling how I grew up between growing up as a child in Oklahoma, completely different culture there, and that of growing up on the reservation. And I was blessed again to have my great grandparents still around when I was a child, and them telling me stories and them telling me aspects of the culture, and learning from them and my grandparents and my parents, and but really with the book, it is it's almost like a PSA, public service message to people, that these experiences that people have that fall under this umbrella of paranormal, it's very real, and like John and I have reiterated over and over, uh, a lot of these people were traumatized by these experiences. Whether encountering a Bigfoot. There was a case I had involving two little girls, 10 and 11 years old, out in the heart of the reservation and being chased by one of these, or followed. Maybe from their perspective, it felt like they were being chased, but maybe they were just simply being followed by this entity that people call a Bigfoot. But it was very traumatizing to them, and or whether it's an elderly woman encountering a Bigfoot that's stealing one of her sheep, you know. But it's to convey to the rest of the world that these things do happen. John and I, and you too, Michelle, we may not always have the answers. We may not understand what's going on, and in each case is unique unto itself, and we may not understand it, but it does happen. And the rest of the world uh, really needs to respect these experiences that people are having, um, and not ridicule somebody or make fun of them or shun them, because of what they're encountering. It happens, we all need to be respectful of each other's experiences, and so really that's the foundation of this first book. Um, it's I've started the second book. The second book that I'm writing is loosely based on an investigation that it really impacted John and I uh, greatly, and but I'm writing a fictional piece in and around that, let's say a novel around that, and it's a different style of writing. This
Mhm.
one, because it is a novel, it is leaning more toward the entertainment side of writing, and you're trying to create something that is more of an entertaining thing as opposed to the original bibliography memoir style way of writing. So yeah.
You're putting characters in a book.
Right, exactly. You're developing characters. You're putting, but just like in a motion picture, you're trying to create these characters that are realistic, but captivate a person's attention. And just like your favorite television star or character on Netflix or something, and following in these series of
Mhm.
episodes and stuff, you're creating characters that draw a person's interest as they're reading. And John paid me one of the best compliments on my book in that when he first received it, the next day he calls me up and he said, "Stan, you kept me up all night." And I laughed and I said, "I kept you up." I said, "How did I do that?" He said, "I just received your book and I started reading it and I couldn't put it down." And that's the one thing that so many people have conveyed to me is that I picked up your book, the cover was captivating, and I started reading the introduction, and I was hooked, and it just makes you want to read the next chapter, and uh, so many people have conveyed that to me. But even my own sister, my younger sister Stephanie, she said one thing I love about your book, I can actually hear your voice as I'm reading the book. I can hear your voice, the way you talk, and you are able to capture that and put that in your style of writing in your book, just like you're talking to me. And and that's one of the greatest compliments that I can have is, people like John and others reading it, and that I'm able to convey what it is that I wanted to put on paper and within the book. So
That's wonderful. John, I know that there are questions you want to ask him.
oh yeah,
John and I have been talking a little bit about your book, and he says there are
yeah,
questions I want to ask him, that stories about off the book, that are not in the
yeah,
book, that you guys shared together, and I
oh
thought
yeah.
that was a wonderful comment to hear.
Well, the
Well,
thing to
John
understand,
is like my brother. John and
yeah,
I, in the years we've gone together, he's like a brother, and we know sometimes what each other's going to say before we even say it. So,
Right.
I'm open to whatever it is that comes out of these questions. So,
yeah. The
anyway,
thing about
fire
the
away.
thing about publishing companies is that when they get a hold of your manuscript, they go through and they try to trim it so that it's streamlined.
Right.
So there's a lot of information that Stan has in those stories
Mhm.
that are in the background that just do not were not printed, that didn't come out because they
Right,
wanted the process of the story to go quickly,
Mhm.
so that and really we're in the day now where any movie that you watch, it has explosions and action and all the way through it, and it doesn't stop. If you look at movies from back in the 40s and the early 50s, there's a lot of heavy plot development, and a lot of young people don't like watching those because it takes too long. and there's too much of this cerebral journey that you have to take to establish the characters and everything. And they would rather see Arnold or somebody else on there, just shooting up the landscape and explosions and car wrecks and everything else. Um, so we've lost some of that, and the publishers realize that people today they want a truncated version
Mm,
of the story. So there's a lot of really cool information in the backstories on a lot of the stuff that Stan wrote about that just didn't make it into the book. And there are other cases that he actually included, um, that were just taken out completely, um, in order to make things go quicker. Even the Navajo origin stories, those were
yeah,
pared down.
yeah, I agree.
Oh
Very
Yeah,
yeah.
much so. They're very intricate stories.
but there are books out there on it that you can read more detailed accounts, and just a lot more information. So hopefully it piques everybody's curiosity. Um, when I became a ranger, back in 1980, they actually put me through a language test to see how much Navajo I knew, and
Hmm.
I took a zero on the whole test because I didn't speak Navajo. For those of you out there who are Dene, um, my grandmother was one of the first people taken. She was put in Fort Defiance boarding school. When she was in boarding school, they were uh, basically whipped and punished for speaking their language. Then she was involved in a relocation program in order to anglicize Navajo kids. So after she got out of high school, she was shipped down to Tucson to pick fruit in the fields. And from there, she was shipped out to Los Angeles to work in the I think it was the aircraft industry at the time, and ended up working out there. So she basically lost her language. Navajo is a very, very difficult language to learn. And when she came back to the reservation to visit, her sisters would just laugh at her.
Hmm.
It's typical of a lot of Navajos. And she'd tell them, "Don't laugh at me, help me," you know,
Hmm.
because she'd try to say things, but the tenses were wrong, and the way it came out, the structure. And so she's speaking as a child would speak. And, it's difficult trying to get back into that once you've been away from it so long. So that was her, and a lot of her sisters were like that too. And so when people would get after me and say, "What's the matter with you? You're not even Navajo." And I'd tell them, "Well, this, and this is why." Um, so, I saw one guy one time. I was at a fast food place,
Hmm.
and the girl behind the counter didn't speak Navajo. And this guy's kind of an activist. He likes pointing out people that don't speak Navajo and chewing them out in public.
Ooh.
And boy, he chewed her out. She was just ready to cry.
Hmm.
And I just thought that was the rudest thing in the world to do, because it's not her fault.
Mm-mm.
A lot of Navajos were beaten and told not to speak their language, or if you know what lye soap is, uh,
Right.
they were told to hold it in their mouth for 30 minutes at a time, with their teeth. And if you touched it with your tongue, it burned.
Mm.
So, that's how they were punished. My mom went through that, at Riverside, or, Riverside Boarding School in Anadarko, Oklahoma. So, there was a lot of that to try to get the Indian out of the Indian and teach him to be an Anglo. And so we have generations of kids like that now. Um,
That would be our generation.
yeah, yeah. So unfortunately, I'd have people come in and I'd tell them, "Hey, can you speak English?" Because I don't speak Navajo. They'd get so mad at me and chew me out, and I'm sorry to everybody out there, but I used to tell them, well, they wanted someone smart for this job, and their mouths would shut, bang, and, and
I
then I
love
tell them,
it.
my story of how my family was and how a lot of other families were, and it wasn't really our fault
Mhm.
that happened. It was just a result of the government. So anyway, uh,
Well, John, it's really interesting that, Stan is now a Navajo author. He and I have had conversations, and he was telling me he's writing his second fictional book. Um, I told him that my great grandmother did the same thing, and she got into the religious. Hers is a pretty historical record too of our nation, but she also wrote for the children because she spoke Navajo, but too was assimilated into the non-native world and punished. But she held on to the language, but she wanted to carry on a legacy that we still need to teach, even if it's through the non-native world. So keep writing, keep talking, address the children, talk about Keisha the cat or the sheep, having being caricatures in her book. And those are still out there if you can find the rare books. And one day Stan's book will be a rare collection as well. Looking People are going to start historically looking for the way you lived your lives today, even though it will be in that time way into the future. But this is why it's so important that we as Navajos write our stories, and people are looking for your book as well that you're drafting right now. And I
yeah, my book is it's more of a look at uh, what the Rangers did and all the different jobs that I did. Um,
right.
Hazardous materials, accident investigation, um, just EMT, technical rescue, things like that, and some of the incidents involved. I've got one where I was trained in explosives, and I actually had a case involving discarded explosives on several occasions. And if I had not had that training, I might have blown myself up. Just if you can imagine nitroglycerin, um, and handling it wrong. So there's lots and lots of stuff. Stan can attest to this that both me and him, we were on call 24/7. So imagine not having any holidays. If it was Halloween, you were sitting in your vehicle in uniform with it warmed up, ready to go.
Hmm.
Uh, they would call us. There was a tornado one time in Tuba City, and according to the National Incident Management System, you send scouts out first and determine what response you need. You don't just send everybody over there. And so we got calls like that to natural disasters and things to go eyeball it up close and make a determination of what kind of assets we needed and what kind of equipment. Um, you can't even go home and have a beer because somebody could bang on your door in the middle of the night and say there's an accident, and if they smell beer on your breath, well, they're gonna make a phone call to your department, and you'll be hard pressed to answer those questions. So there was a lot of sacrifice. I can't tell you how many times Stan probably got rousted out of bed and told to go somewhere, and all they could give him was in this area. If you can go over there and take care of this. And then he'd have to go over there and then be talking to everybody along the way, trying to figure out where this thing is and what's happening.
Yeah.
Stan, if you could share about your story in the chapter 7, the old man and the UFO. Is that old man, the UFO, your dad?
No. uh, he's this is somebody you would probably have wanted for your dad. A really well respected community member that had this experience of seeing a UFO that came to his home in the middle of the night, and his telling of that experience. And this was one of those cases where, John, it was an early case as far as the paranormal went.
Hmm.
And it was one that, for me, it was one of those cases where it made the hair on the back of your neck stand up, just like those conversations John and I used to have with our good friend Clifford Mahooty, that Zuni elder who passed away in recent times. He would tell us these stories, and hearing this coming from one of the elders from the community just entranced you with what it is they're sharing with you. And that was one of those cases, it had a lot of different elements to it. And it's one that, even though he's passed on, the family members that live there at his and his wife's residence, they still experience UFO activity in and around the home. And a very powerful case that had a lot of impact in the way you investigated these kind of cases and the way you view this kind of phenomenon. So yeah, it was an amazing case for me, and I know for John, it was one of those cases that was really an eye opener.
Was this kind of the timeline that you guys were starting to witness UFO activity in your line of work? And or was that something, because I know John, you and Stan, you've shared some of your younger age stories where you were seeing something but didn't realize why you were seeing it as a young child. I never had those kind of UFO stories. It wasn't until I started to get into my 40s is when my experiences started, which would have influenced a lot of things. And here today, we're talking today about your book and our experiences on the show. Was that kind
Well,
of a turn?
for me and John, the way we view these phenomenon is that, this past summer, John and I did an expedition into Canyon de Chelly with a great friend of ours, Steve. And so we spent several days traversing the canyon. John was blessed to have worked in that Canyon de Chelly as a young ranger, and did a stint with the National Park Service in that canyon. But to be able to view the pictographs, petroglyphs within that canyon and these other areas in this region, and having developed a relationship with people like I'd mentioned earlier, Clifford Mahooty, and the way they talked about these images within those canyon walls, these phenomenon, they're something that have been there possibly long before man even occupied this little planet. There may have been visitations by extraterrestrial and UFOs to this little blue marble long before we walked here. And so it's nothing new. Uh, these phenomenon, my sister has a saying, Deborah has a saying that uh, uh, really paranormal is very normal. That really and truly man has just inherited a paranormal world, a paranormal universe and planet. We're just now trying to figure out, hey, is this, our government's dangling this above our heads with disclosure and stuff, but it was disclosed to us for thousands of years, if that these things are real. We're just now getting around to investigating this stuff and taking it seriously. Um, this stuff has been there for a long, long, long time, and we're just trying to teach the masses to not laugh and ridicule people about it. We're still at that stage, and so really we're still like a little toddler, uh, walking around sticking our hands in our poopy pants. We're very rudimentary. Man hasn't advanced very long. Yeah, we have iPads and uh, iPhones and things like that, and yeah, we're sending people into space, uh, but really and truly, we're still very rudimentary. If we're still committing war, killing little babies, innocent babies, we haven't advanced very far. You know, um, if little children are still dying and elderly people are being killed, we got to get beyond that kind of mentality and thinking. We can be much smarter than that. We need to. I think our Creator has blessed us with the resources to have a heaven here on earth. We have all the resources. We have water, yet we polluted it. We have the ability to grow uh, the agriculture on this planet to feed every person on this planet, and but we've got to get beyond these things like greed and things like that. You know, but these things do happen, and we need to realize that. So
I love when you talk about the origins. We talk amongst the natives ourselves as being the star people.
right,
And people can't connect to that because they don't understand what that means. Mainstream is just coming into understanding that there are UFO sightings, which
right,
now brings it into the mode of scientific evaluation. And you and I and John have talked about this in numerous conversations that we scientificize the phenomena when we have to look from its origins are very spiritual. And I think that's
right,
what's missing. And we are a spiritual people, and we connect to that resource you talk about through spirit, through the heavens, talking about creator creating Father Sky, Mother Earth, but it's in our religion, and it's in our ceremonies. And when Clifford Mahooty would put himself out there, it was in a timeline that his tribe did not like what he was saying because
right.
they thought he was giving away secret ceremonial
Very much
process.
so.
And but he was just trying to teach that no, we are the star people. We have the knowledge. We want to keep the world, Mother Earth, healthy. And I had some
Right.
interactions with Clifford as well, and he was very
Right.
wise, intelligent, engineer background.
Yes.
So all these components come together, and we're
Right.
the star people. Let's just call it what it
Right.
is.
Right. True. We've learned from our indigenous teachings, or even around the world, that
Mhm.
everything in our universe is interconnected. Everything
Exactly.
is. And that has led to even a lot of the theories and philosophies that John and I have developed and created, in regards to the dimensions and their relationship to the paranormal, and even these creation stories around the world, and talking about different worlds and different planes of existence. and but it's all interconnected. I mean, we learned that from elders like Clifford Mahooty that we are a spiritual being first and foremost, and yes, we're here in this physical world really for a short period of time from our birth till we transition, like Clifford, to another plane of existence. And we all will, and it's a part of their journey we're on with our soul and with our spirit. And but again, while we're here, we try to teach each other and our young people that there's a better way to live our lives than currently what we're doing now, and we need to be awake to that. Need to be have our eyes open to the universe and to our world, and to listen to our heart, listen to those voices from beyond that are trying to guide us in living our lives better than what we are right now.
Well, that's we just recently had Art Hardy as the medicine man, and that's another aspect of the spiritual world, that there are designated medicine men who have the gift, and then they go out and heal our native nations and talk about these spiritual things that exist for our behalf so that we can heal. And that's another aspect of intervening and convening with the cosmos or with other entities out there. So, there's another aspect of the physical form that holds like those gifts within a medicine man.
And one thing
True.
that needs to be said too is that,
Hmm.
you know, um, here in the continental United States, we have this idea that science has to be sciency,
Hmm.
and it cannot. There's a separation of church and state,
Right.
yeah, which was written into the Constitution early on. But we are spiritual people,
Hmm.
and all of us have a spiritual sense in us that a lot of times is missing, and
Right.
we search for it. We try to find, people say, I'm looking for the meaning of life. And, they search and search. And some of them go to foreign countries and join religious groups to try to find this thing that's missing.
They'll actually
We
go on quests to a
Right.
Yeah.
quest to try to search for that. A
and
lot of
and
times
yet
it's right here. It's right here.
Yeah.
all of us
Right
have
here, the
this.
drum, the beat of the
Yes,
drum. Go
it's
ahead.
innate.
Hmm.
It's just unused. And
Right.
sometimes it's a journey just looking into yourself. I had a
Right.
friend that used to say that I was like an onion. You had to peel layers and layers and layers to get to the core. And it's this process of peeling off these layers for yourself and then find out what's in that core. A lot of us have
Hmm.
gifts of healing, gifts of things that are in us, gifts of sight, and we don't use them because they're buried.
True. True.
And and yet, if you can get in touch with that, and I'm not saying go join organized religion, because organized religion was created to keep people in order. I'm talking about the internal thing inside you that's yearning to come out, that's yearning for a better life, that's yearning for that meaning, and we can find that within ourselves. And if it helps, yeah, go to a church. They can get you started on that process, but there's so much more involved than just going to church on Sunday, and it
Right.
becomes something that you just go through every single day.
Well, it's almost like, John, what you and I, when we're asked about smudging and saging, to bless your home, to bless your person. You know, a lot of people will ask you and I about that, and just like what we reiterate with that, to say that if you're just going through the motions, you're going to miss the whole thing. It has to be about the intent that we each have and our mindset. You know, throughout our law enforcement career, we heard that over and over and over. You got to have the mindset, law enforcement mindset, and everything, tactical mindset. Well, you almost, as a human being, you have to have a spiritual mindset because these things are all around us. And if you're just going through the motions, you're gonna miss everything. You've got to stop. You've got to look at all of your senses, not only seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, your sixth sense, your gut instinct. You know, you have to listen to that inner voice that we all have, sometimes to keep us safe, sometimes to lead us on a path to where our journey is supposed to lead. But sometimes if we're just going through the motion, we miss all of that.
You know, the one thing that gets to me is when they take a spiritual, sacred process and call it woo woo. That offends my spirit. And I'm going to say it here on the show. John's can talk about the military. I'm going to talk about woo woo. And the woo woo term, when I've looked it up, it means sacred. And when we misuse language, because we're losing our language as Navajos, but we're also giving other things interpretations when it is spirit. It is just the feeling John and you have spoken about. We have to look within us. What is our spirit telling us? What direction do we need to go? How are we leading others through our spirit? And the knowledge that we gain through spirit is now being interpreted as something that pretty much doesn't keep it very clean. It
True,
corrupts the very spirit that we were God given. Whether you believe in a
true.
God or a grandfather or whatever higher spirit that you want to believe,
Yeah,
um, we have been given that for each of us in the non native world as well as the native world. And we
right.
always need to get back to that place. And this is why I love this show because we can talk about these things without offending others or being, to
Right.
sign a document so you won't go woo woo on us. And I went, okay, whatever. It's my
John
spirit.
and I, throughout our travels, you know, even around the world, and throughout the years that John and I have been out there presenting this stuff, that's one gift that him and I have always had, and you have that too. I've seen that, where we can sit, we can talk with an 85-year-old person or an 8-year-old person. We can sit and we can connect with those individuals on a human level and share experiences and talk and have respect for each other. And really, I think that's probably a big part of the mission of what it is we do with this podcast is just welcoming people. You know, you look at all of the comments and stuff we have today from Jamie Johnson, uh, Darren Wood, Mary Louise. Thank you all for your comments. We're very blessed to have you guys sharing comments and positive information with us and with others, and we thank you for that. And but the three of us are very blessed in our travels and being able to travel and share what it is we've learned from people like Clifford Mahooty, you know, that trans it
Transcend.
transcends. That's the exact word. Transcends even being Native American and sharing these ideas and philosophies with people that are non-native and because we're all human. We're all human. Yes, we were us three were blessed to have Native American uh, relations and families and being born into Native American cultures and having received those teachings and blessings and some of the language and uh, but yeah, it transcends even that, and I learned that from people like Clifford. That's why he went out there into the public and he put it on himself to share what it is he shared, those sacred things that he shared with the world. And even John and I, at the beginning of doing all the presentations, we knew we were going to be making ourselves a target for other law enforcement to laugh at and being ridiculed because really we were one of the first of the law enforcement that did put ourselves out there to say, yeah, this stuff is real for the most part, and people have these experiences, and you can call us whatever names you want to. We've been called every name in the book in our careers in law enforcement, even our family, our mothers and grandmothers, and it was a part of law enforcement. You don't yeah, when people are calling those names and your families, those your precious family members calling them names, as a true law enforcement officer, you don't respond. You don't grab them and handcuff them and throw them to the ground and kick them, and you don't do that. You have respect for all people. You don't know what it is they've gone through in their life. You don't know what it is they've experienced. They may have had lost a spouse or a child that can affect how they think and behave. They may have drugs in their system or alcohol that cause them to behave a certain way. To be a true dedicated law enforcement officer, you're there to serve and to protect people, regardless of their religion, regardless of their cultural, their ethnicity. You're there to help, and that's what we had to do as law enforcement, even in the paranormal investigations. You're there to uh, help people and to protect people. You've sworn an oath to do that, and that oath didn't say, "Well, you're going to protect the native people and all of the Anglo people can go jump off a bridge or whatever." You didn't do that. You were there for all people, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what's missing today when we turn on the news and we see where a lot of the law enforcement today are abusing their authority and abusing people. They go to work, they're pissed off because of something with their marriage or whatever, and kicking people and kicking a dog, and that's we're not there for that. We're there to help people regardless. And yeah, I realize we're only human, but we were taught, John and I were taught, you're held to a higher standard in law enforcement. We swore an oath, and we couldn't, these things about the paranormal. We're not lying about our experiences. We're not making shit up. This is what happened. And do we understand it? For me, speaking for myself, 80% of it, I don't understand it, and
Right.
even to this day, but it did happen. So,
Yeah, one of the cool things that happened was that back in 2009, me and Stan would sit around the office and just bounce ideas back and forth of what could be causing a lot of this. And we came up with this idea using string theory and that branch of physics to say that these dimensions, that their dimensions are different frequencies and they overlay each other. We think of them as walls or barriers, but they actually exist one on top of the other. And the, the, the physicists say that we could have 10 or 12 dimensions or that there could be an infinite number of dimensions. And
Very much so.
and believe it or not, time is considered a dimension. Okay, so we'll let that sink in. You know, the time that we experience is linear. We're a baby, we grow up, we go through, all our lives, and then we end. And to us, it's just a linear, straight line path. But according to physics, time is a dimension, and it can be manipulated in certain ways through natural means and through arbitrary means by somebody that wants to manipulate it. And so when I found that out, it was like, wow, um, time isn't what we thought it was. Um, and I like Doctor Who's deal, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff. It's
Mhm.
it's just it's too big to just hold in your hand. And so after we came up with this idea of dimensions and Bigfoot coming in through different dimensions, he's a dimensional creature. UFOs popping in and out of existence, even hauntings, repeating things that have happened in the past. We started to realize that the Navajo creation story fit right in with going through different dimensions and migrating. And a lot of native tribes have these stories of going from different place to different place. So we we started talking about this, and slowly we've seen. We weren't the only ones talking about it, but we were one of the first. And slowly, what we've seen over the years is that everybody has jumped on board that wagon. And now you see the same theories being talked about on TV and all the different TV shows about that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting. We haven't seen anything that tells us otherwise yet. Um, Seems like it's, and if there is something that comes out, a new branch of physics or something, then hey, we're closer to the truth, right?
It's always evolving. It's always changing. That's we're always in a constant state of change. The universe is. So it's the way things is, way
You
things
know,
are.
John, you talked about convergence of timelines and everything. The other day, I got a phone call from a very close friend of mine who has special gifts, and she had gotten sick, had gotten the COVID, we think. And she said she was in her living room just laying there watching some television, and all of a sudden, timeline came into her existence where there was a Red Sox baseball player and she saw him talking to somebody on the field, and he kind of looked around like, where am I? And he looked at straight at her, and their eyes met, and then he disappeared. No, because sometimes we get sick, we might think, oh, is that was that a delusional state? No, she said it was real as anything could be. So we talk about there are times things converge, maybe because we're at a vibration that we're existing in. And I told her that you could have been in a vibration being ill, but also being vulnerable, and this opens up to you. I mean, these are experiences that real people have. And like I think it was Stan saying that we should not make fun of the things, and we make alike because we're friends, because we understand, because she's got certain gifts, and she's not Native American, but she'll share all her stories. And these are some of the stories that come through people that we associate, the Mahooties, my friend, your friends, your cases that you've covered on the reservation, the reports, anything like that, where we, because they didn't happen to us, they happen to others, and we have to look at them from a very objective point of view. And and speaking of the elders, of our tribes, today we are the elders, and here we are. That's what's missing is our youth are not listening to the elders anymore. It's a respect. And when we were at Judy's conference, I love that story of the elder woman who stood up during our panel, when she shared her story about the Bigfoot coming to her village and sharing the story about your people are not behaving. I need to assist you. We're just here to help. Those kind of things that we could be missing in our world today. Because Stan, you talked about murder and you talked about the warring, and we're not quite there. But what's on the other side that we could be learning through our spirits with each other
Right.
and listening to our elders?
Yeah,
Right.
in answer to Andy, we do not consume peyote.
No.
And
No.
peyote is something that is used as a means to attain a higher spiritual state. It's kind of like almost like taking a shortcut to get there. Uh, it helps you open what some people classify as your third eye. And no, we don't do it. And there's a real simple reason for that. When you're in law enforcement, you do not use drugs at all. You don't smoke marijuana, you don't do anything. And if you smoke cigarettes, you're going to have a hard time running after that suspect that's taken off from you. And you might, your arteries might be hardened and you could keel over and die. So you
Yeah.
try to keep yourself in the best shape you can. Um, every year we had to do a pack test with 40-pound pack, um, hiking a mile and a half as fast as you could hike. If you started to trot, you were done. You had to go back and do it again. So you couldn't run, you couldn't trot, you had to walk fast. And what they wanted to see is, could you get out of a fire environment with a pack on your back and your equipment, and not keel over. So we had to do that every year, um, along with fire shelter training and all that stuff. And some of those guys were really shocked because we'd take our gun belts off and toss them aside and then get under the shelters. And they said, "Why are you doing that?" And we says, "Well, we don't want our pepper spray to explode, while we're under the shelter. That'd be pretty hard to lay down, in there." So,
I've
uh,
never done peyote. I have never consumed that. That's associated with the American Indian Church as
yeah.
most.
And one thing people
I
need to
did.
understand,
I
yeah,
had consumed that. One of my girlfriends, her uncle was a roadman, and I did
Mhm.
experience that. And it wasn't something, I was doing artwork at the time that conveyed Native American church images and things of that nature. And to me, I needed to have the experience what it meant to be involved in Native American church for me to be able to
Right.
convey these images and paintings and stuff. And so, but it's not something I do today. And not that I have anything against people that do practice that. I respect everybody's right to worship how they choose to. And so,
Was
yeah,
that
and
during your law enforcement years that you did that with the Native American Church
no, that's far
it was before,
before?
way early, way before my law
Just
enforcement
just
years.
clarify that for the audience.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, and just another PSA here. Um, if you go out and your buddy got a hold of some peyote and you want to try some, be aware that if peyote is not properly cleaned, it contains strychnine.
Mhm.
And strychnine is like having a bank account in your body. It builds up and builds up with interest, and then it can kill you. So that's why you need a practitioner that knows all about it, all the preparation to handle that stuff. So don't just go out and find a peyote button yourself and take it home, dry it out, and say, "Hey, buddies, come over here and try it." You might be giving them strychnine too.
Well,
Um,
I
Okay.
was scared out of my wits when I was a young reporter on the Navajo reservation. I worked for the Navajo Times, and I was sent on an assignment to cover a story with the American Indian Church. And the FBI agents came and raided the church.
Yeah.
So I
Oh
got
yeah.
out of there as a young reporter. I was 19 at the time, so I thought, "Oh, I guess I'm not going to do that one, huh?"
That's funny.
So no, that I was covering a story because there were some issues going on with the federal government and peyote at that particular time.
yeah, for
I
me
wanted to
growing,
say,
yeah, go ahead.
go ahead, John. No, you go first, John.
I was just going to say, for
You
me growing up, drugs were always available. All kinds of pills, marijuana, everything else. It was all there. But I was very athletic. I played football. I was in ROTC. Um, just didn't, and I didn't like the idea of something that could affect my body so much. And so that kind of scared me is losing track of being able to control yourself.
Hmm.
I spent a whole lifetime in martial arts. So, I understand the draw, and in a spiritual sense, when you're in a Native American church that's practicing these, believe it or not, in NAC, you do not have to partake of the peyote if you don't want to.
true,
You're not
true,
required to take it. It's
Hmm.
up to you.
right.
So, um, it's there's a lot of myth surrounding it, and I guess that's what I wanted to get out there.
The other thing is people have this idea that when you do partake of peyote, is that uh, it affects every individual the same. Like you're on some type of LSD trip and seeing all of these hallucinating images and colors and stuff like that. For each individual, it was different, and for me, it didn't affect me in that manner. Um, as far as hallucinating and colors and all of that stuff, it just didn't affect me like that. So
Could have been a healing path for you.
yeah,
We can interconnect drugs with our experiences with UFOs and entities and things. People go, "Well, do you do drugs?" There's like they
right,
correlate that, and I
right,
don't think that's should be included in that. Yeah, I may have tried this, but that didn't bring on my UFO experiences.
true.
People kind of
Well,
interconnect those two things.
in law enforcement, in your interviewing and interrogation training, unfortunately, that has to be a part of it. You do have to ask
Yeah.
these people that you're doing interviews with if they've partaked in whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever. Um, that's a
Is
part
that
of
a
it, and John can attest to that. It's not all. It's not. It doesn't necessarily be an accusatory done in that way, asking those
right?
kind of things. It's just one of those check boxes you have to go through and check and on your forms that yes, you did ask that individual if they were under the influence of anything at the time of their experience and but I see where you're coming from. Yeah.
Yeah, there's always that correlation. Are you on drugs? Because when
Yeah.
you see
Yeah.
these things, did you do a drug?
yeah.
Yeah, we
In my
Yeah.
case, no, no, I've never
one
done
of
any
our very
drugs.
first cases was in the Bloomfield area, and we had 30 people cite Bigfoot that had
Mhm.
sightings
Yeah.
of it, and they as a group went to the police department, the local police, and the press was called, and it was a big event. And the lieutenant in charge of that department came out and literally told everybody in front of the press, I wonder how much these people have had to drink. Ha 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 ha.
Right.
And
Right,
made a big
right.
joke out of it. And those people turned their back and they wouldn't have anything to do with the police department after
Right.
that.
True.
During the investigation, we found out that what they were seeing, there was actually something out there.
Right.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
correlation. They
Well,
try to downplay it.
I wanted to stop and say thank you, both you and Michelle and John, for allowing us to have this podcast that's centered in and around the book, and to kind of give the public some insight to how this book came together and some of the thoughts behind the writing of the book. And I appreciate that. I think it's something that the public wants information on, and so thank you for that.
You're welcome, Stan. Thank you for being a part of our group and a part of the
I'm glad
storyline.
we made it. I'm
Yeah,
glad we made it here.
we, we,
That was a
we call them,
challenge.
we're now naming it the gremlins, when we have these
Uh,
little hiccups. But, it's just part of the storyline.
Yeah, he's probably going,
yeah.
But yeah, but it's just your story is very important in your book, and getting back on
Thank
track
you.
with your book, it is
Yeah.
important to read upon your experiences. We want to hear from John's book too, eventually. I know we all have busy lives. We all have stories to tell. That's why we have this podcast, so people can come and listen, and a safe place to tell the stories, and and be able to capture the stories that each of us, because we all three didn't ask for this in our lives. It just
No.
happens, and now we're telling the story. But
True.
I'm so grateful for you both as being partners and being a part of the Paranormal Rangers, and your ability to
Yeah.
go out there and witness and tell others that
Yeah.
we have all had our own experiences, and to write
True.
about it takes it's courage. It takes a lot
yeah.
of courage.
And the important thing there too is that by Stan sharing his experiences, uh, it's letting people know out there that it's okay. You're not crazy. You know, um, nothing is wrong with you. You just happen to brush against this. And believe me, some people have told us they would chop off their arm to have a paranormal experience. And we're sitting there going, okay. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think I don't care if I never have another paranormal experience. That's good with me. You can have all mine.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But there are
Yeah.
intermittent moments in our lives of something that we're going through, and maybe we need those moments. Maybe it's a healing process as well that
True.
we have these experiences. Well,
Very
let's
true.
go in spirit. We thank everybody for being
Yeah.
on in your comments. There was some really really
Yeah.
great comments today. We
Yeah.
can't. I wish we could answer them all, but time doesn't allow
Yeah.
that. And please, Stan, come back. Come back on the show
Yeah,
when you have
Yeah.
the
yeah.
comment.
For everybody's information, Stan's book has been selling really good. It's actually increasing now,
Yeah.
and it's so he's there's a lot of demands that the publisher is putting on him to go to book signings, to be on other podcasts, and some of the biggest ones around. And so he's and it's amazing that they all happen on Wednesdays. Um, he, he he
Yeah.
called me one
Yeah.
time and he said, what do you do for a sore throat?"
Mm.
He says, "I've been
Oh yeah.
talking so much I can hardly talk." So
Yeah.
so we were
Yeah.
talking about honey and lemon and in a hot tea and
He's been
yeah,
talking too much, and he needs to
yeah,
to
keep
rest
cough
his voice.
drops in your pocket and things like that. So
Well, it's been wonderful, guys, and and I want to apologize to everybody out there. We had some technical difficulties, and we've been coming on late as a grade, but the gremlins are now being worked out. But we really appreciate our audience, and please subscribe to our channel. We would love to have you be a part of our family, and have a great day, and happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and enjoy your meals and your family.
Thank you.
Take
Thank you,
care.
guys. Thank you.
Bye bye.